Hello there. Today I'm going to play you an episode that we taped last week at the NAGGL conference. The guest? None other than Charles Green. You may remember Charles from episode 46. He's a BDO at Harvest, 40 years of SBA experience. Still don't remember? He's the one that says he doesn't pay brokers. Now you know. Anyway, I could not go to Atlanta and not see Charles, so I invited him up to my hotel room / recording studio at the Hyatt in downtown Atlanta and basically asked him to make sense of everything going on in our world today as SBA lenders. Rising rates, inflation, supply chain, and how it all impacts us as SBA lenders. We also discussed shrinking premiums, the need for better training in our industry. I think you're going to like this one. So without further ado, let's get on to the episode. Charles, welcome to my first ever in-person interview. Congratulations. You made it.
Thank you, Ray, and welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you. No, it's nice here. I like it. So I haven't done this in person before, so I don't know if this is going to be awkward. What do I do with my hands? I go like this. Okay. So it's been a little while. You're one of my first ever recurring guests on the podcast. After you made your appearance last time, did you get any sort of what was the reaction?
I did get an email. Oh, I'm sorry, a letter from a BDO originator of a leading SBA lender, and it was kind of come on the form of a thank you note, kind of a card that I believe he wrote on both sides, but he expressed a lot of complimentary things about the interview itself and how much he had gotten from it, and appreciated me doing it and appreciated your organizing the effort. And I later met him because he works for the same company I do, which surprised me even more because I didn't know his name up until then.
Yeah. But there's a lot of employees there.
Right, and it's growing and churning like everyone's, but I agreed with him. I saw him at a sales conference and just noted that what you're doing with this podcast is taking people who are, relatively speaking, young in the business, and you're seeking out people who are more seasoned and traveled in the business and trying to pick up life's lessons, tips, war stories, and so forth that offer a lot of lessons to people coming into the business and fighting to still find success.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because, first of all, when I was starting out, I was just pounding the phones and I didn't know anything. And the only people I could talk to were my coworkers. I didn't even know there was a world outside of this. Like, we're at the NAGGL conference right now, and I did not know things like this existed until I did. But yeah, it's great. And, people listen. Like one day I was just looking for this type of content because, I get obsessive. You know this. I eat, sleep, and breathe SBA loans. So after work, I'm like Googling whatever tips for BDOs, and there's nothing out there. It just doesn't exist. So I think in that moment I was just like, maybe I'll just make that. You had a very controversial take, which we clipped and put on LinkedIn, and it made the rounds. And people were reaching out to me, and they're like, "Oh, I can't believe that Charles guy doesn't pay brokers."
Unapologetically, absolutely, yes.
Still, that's still your
Right.
approach, right?
Right.
That's funny. Well, good. Well, hopefully you can say some more controversial things here so we can go viral.
No worries.
No pressure. So, the year is 2022. Let me just set the stage. So the year is 2022. SBA lending coming off a record-smashing year, $36 billion in authorizations last fiscal year. And now we're facing some headwinds, and I want to get your take because you've been around the block. You've been doing this for how many years?
I guess since I left college, which was 1979.
Same, the college part. So you got inflation, you got rising rates, you got supply chain. I guess my question is, how screwed are we?
See, I think it's a great day in SBA lending, truly. I mean, we're not screwed at all. We're actually very well positioned for many reasons. Number one, you cited inflation. Well, remember in B school, what is inflation? It is too much money chasing too few goods. And some of that is a real problem with some supply chains, particularly in construction. A lot of materials that went short during the pandemic and the shutdown, and supply routes were disrupted. Uh, you know, Consumer goods factories shut down in Asia, and that slowed down a lot of transport and tied up boats, and it has a trickle effect, and that has played itself out and is slowly starting to recover and correct itself. Like, we look at construction materials, didn't stay at their peak level very long. We've got this war in Ukraine that's caused uncertainty about the world gasoline or petroleum supplies and stocks, and that's made prices spike up. But not one of these gas retailers has paid that much for gasoline. It's the perception of what they will have to pay. So there's a great book called Oil on the Brain, if you want to really learn about the commodity exchange and its role in how gasoline prices are set at the pump. And you'll find out that our government has absolutely no control over it. It's one of the most astounding corners of the free market that still exist. And true to unfortunate capitalism, it screws us all by what we pay at the pump, but it has nothing to do with what the supplier and the refiners are paying today, for petroleum. I'll jump to interest rates. They're rising up to fight inflation. We're going to take some of the wind out of the sail to slow things down. That makes general lending slow down a little bit. Everyone is concerned about global cash flows and the impact of these higher rates and higher payments. That's where SBA lenders are going to stay in business. We're not retreating. We're going to be making loans. We're going to be underwriting them, and we're going to face the same headwinds, but there'll be a lot of conventional loans that'll just back off and sit the market out as rates go up, because they're concerned about the impact that'll have on new loans, new projects.
Okay, first of all, I wasn't expecting such an eloquent answer about the economy, Charles. That was great. Like, I understand what they're doing with the rising rates to kind of like temper down, like making like new loans, like for new businesses coming in. I mean, it could force down values of real estate. It could force down values of businesses that are being bought and sold. But what about the loans that are already on the books? Like, most of these 7A loans are adjustable rate. So now all they're increasing these rates right now. So like, the existing portfolio, is that not in jeopardy if this rates are going to spike up?
Well, I think a lot of SBA lenders are enjoying record levels of liquidity right now because of this is coming on the heels of the 2 rounds of Triple P, 2 rounds of EIDL loans that have given people a lot of money to pack away. And if they've been responsible for that, their payments will go up, but this won't put them out of business. I think corporate profits have been up everywhere across the board. So again, they can absorb a lot of this, and it'll just stop a lot of the looser spending that's been driving up demand. The loans are on the books, hopefully have been underwritten with some
some stress testing,
and a little bit of understanding as to global cash flow rather than just this loan request. And a prudent lender is not going to be caught in bad shape if rates go up 1.5, maybe even 2 points. There'll be some pressure, but nothing that it shouldn't be able to ride out.
Yeah, but that coupled with their costs going up, coupled with their supply chain issues. I mean, if you could have a perfect storm with some of these businesses of getting hit by multiple things at once.
It'll depend on how fast the economy responds to these monetary tools to raise rates and take a lot of that superfluous spending out, and that will lower demand and inflation settles back.
So I don't know. You checked the secondary markets, like premiums?
I just sold a loan last week, so I know that that's the lowest I've sold one for in 2 years.
Can you tell me what it was?
115.
115? That's high. That's, I assume, real estate, 25-year term, prime plus 275, no broker payment.
Absolutely.
But
that's my kind of loan.
Okay, and it's like, what, about $1 million?
It was $500,000.
$500,000, so smaller. So, okay, because I sold one Oh, you know what? It was prime plus 2. Because I'm not out here trying to rip everyone off, Charles. I'm just kidding.
I'm trying to go for inflation.
Well, but it was like I think like 10 or 11 or like 11. Maybe like it might have been like 11 and change. So I guess that kind of is about right. But don't you think that, or I mean, it's a fact, right? That if the rates are going up, there's the prepays increase, which brings down the premiums.
It depends. Last time I saw any data, the average SBA loan life was only about 8 years.
Yeah, like I thought it was like
And
7.
so if someone's put a loan on the books, um, 3 years ago, and they discover they have a variable rate loan all of a sudden because they're not paying attention, and they're thinking about refinancing it, they're going to have a hard time doing that, financing out of an 85% LTV loan into a 65% LTV loan, unless they're willing to throw up a lot of money to pay the loan down and then go through another $30,000 of closing costs. And that'll slow down some of that, the desire to go refinance. If you've been in a loan for 5 to 10 years, you're already in the outlier territory, and it may make sense for you to refinance for a lot of reasons. Maybe cash out, and you've got the value there to have your 65% LTV and still get some money to pay for the refi. So I don't think it's going to be any more than business as usual.
So you don't think that the premiums are going to continue to go down to the point where like no one can make any money in this business?
No. Because again, there's a demand for this product, this government guaranteed T-bill, which is what we create when you sell a loan strip.
Yeah, and also looking back at last year, the premiums were just so high that it just seems like they're coming down drastically this year, but really they're almost kind of just returning down back to normal.
Right. In 2019 and 2020, they were kind of bouncing between 17 to 19%. But last year, why did they spike up? We had a 90% guarantee.
Yeah, some got sold at like 22%, which is crazy. I don't know if anyone's seen more than 22%. Drop it in the comments below.
I laughed all the way to the bank. I had a 22.4.
Wow. So you're in the camp of, which I don't disagree with by any means, but SBA lenders don't pull out right now, or I mean, maybe some do, but like you think it's more so SBA banks doubling down on SBA as conventional lending kind of pulls back because you at least are lending with a guarantee.
I think that would be sort of a parochial bank SBA lender who's in a small market where they stay within, and they may have some concerns about that. But I think a shop that's well versed on SBA and has kind of been through a couple of these cycles before would know better and stay at it, and in fact maybe emphasize SBA lending.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I think we're in for a couple pretty busy years. I know I'm seeing tremendous volume right now. No slowdown, nothing like that. Last week was probably one of my busiest weeks ever. And it's I do a lot of business acquisition, and those businesses, the multiples remain pretty reasonable compared to some other markets.
And I sent you a referral recently. I don't remember who, but
you sent me a guy at a bank on a deal. You have the best referrals, Charles. It's a startup franchise restaurant
with a story.
with the franchise, it's their first unit.
Right.
3 partners.
Trying to give you some experience.
One of the partners, he's passed away, but I mean, I don't even want to get into it here because it's a crazy story. But anyway, thank you so much for that. And we are going to do it though.
Somebody asked me to give them all my turn downs, refer them on my turn down. I said, I'm in SBA lending. What do you mean what's a turn down? I don't know.
I feel like you are pretty passionate about this. I feel like you think this is a good idea where I'm getting at here. And it's basically having to do with training new kind of blood into the industry, sort of, because like we're hiring right now 3 underwriters, 2 closers, and that's so that we can then hire more salespeople, right? And then, and we're in year 3. We're kind of a startup. We're trying to do things differently, leaning into technology. I mean, it honestly, like the stuff with technology, it's like going to change the way closers do their job. And so you go out to the market and there's folks that have been doing this 10, 15, 20 years. How do you bring those folks in? First of all, they're, everyone's hiring, so it's super hard to even hire people. But then also, if you're trying to do things different, like how can you then bring in people that have been doing it the same way for 20 years and really get them to buy into doing it different? So I'm thinking in my head, well, why don't we just train brand new people? But everyone's remote. We have no physical office. How do you train people right now?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a complicated answer. I won't spend an hour telling you the way things used to be and how they should be changed, but we are remote right now largely, and there is training assets out there. They're not always as helpful or move as fast as you want them to be, but I'm not a big fan of hiring someone with 20 years experience and paying them a premium when you can find them. Finding BDOs is not a challenge. Just go sit at the bar for a little while and you'll find out who's successful and who's not. But the underwriters and the closing processors are a lot more reserved. They're not at the conferences as often, and they're harder to spot and even harder to get a phone number and a name and so forth. And I would be a proponent of putting training wheels on and starting slower. And in some organizations, yours example is newer, and so you have a smaller bench perhaps, but you start out by putting some of that underwriting responsibility on the business developers, meaning that they're going to have to develop a better, more thorough package that can be worked faster than throwing half of it out there and just starting up and then having to start asking questions and requesting more documents and elongating the cycle of underwriting.
Okay.
But you've got leadership that does have experience, and leadership has been around 20 years, and they've embraced and subsequently invested in this technology. I would look for lesser experienced people and train them by fire with a lot of handholding, a lot of mentoring that is going to be a commitment on the part of management to spend maybe 2 hours a day for a couple of weeks, and then an hour a day for a couple of weeks, and then invest in plane tickets and Zoom calls to be putting these people into all kinds of training to not just ensure they know everything, but to double down on what they already know. Whether it's D&B or the Banking Association or a banking school or NAGGL or NAGGL, there's a lot to learn out there. And come up with your own internal training program to breed your own kind of people.
But no one's doing that.
Of course not. And why is because we'd rather just pay higher salaries and go get somebody that gives us instant gratification, just like everybody sells their SBA loans for 10 or 11 points when they could make that money back in about 24 months and more by holding the loan. But that's the problem with SBA lending. Everybody wants instant gratification.
Yes. So, yeah. And so we're kind of in the mix of it with all this volume, and we're trying to, let's say, backfill a position. So now people are even more they're even busier. And so they get into that kind of rhythm where there's no time to just allocate 30% of their week towards training new staff, right?
No, but imagine you built a underwriting template that let the BDO populate 75% of it before it's sent up for consideration. Or, you don't need to be doing the dialogue, but the narrative, but you could certainly do the spreadsheets and you could fill in all the blanks with, researched information and go do the web search and look at the databases.
But putting it on the BDO, I mean, does that make sense? I mean, if we're hiring someone to, be in business development, why are we then giving them more desk work?
You're training them to be better BDOs, to spot problems earlier. I mean, what's the churn rate of new deals that are identified versus those that actually fund? And that's for anybody's organization. And the more successful BDO, is going to be batting 99%. And that's not to say they're, not doing a high volume. It's to say they know when to walk away, or they know when to tell somebody to pause button on and go fix yourself, and then I'll come back to you, rather than just sort of grabbing the financials, throwing it against the wall to see what works. Because that eats up a lot of that underwriting time and gums up, the entire office when you're thinking about several BDOs doing that.
Right. So when you go and submit a deal, you have a 99% close rate?
Yeah, I do. I'd put it 99.
So it's going to get approved and it's going to close, essentially. Well, that's about as high as you can get. We have to allocate 1% for, borrowers that die in closing, or like a pandemic coming through or something.
I haven't lost one once it got a commitment letter, ever.
I mean, I just lost one this week. Environmental issue. What do you do if on properties where it's a high risk? Do you just pass on environmental?
Well, my company, of course, doesn't do a lot of C-stores with gas tanks, and maybe that's why they sidestepped the question. But certainly there are environmental problems. I do child care center loans primarily, and they have to have lead tests. Lead tests used to be for water and paint, and now it's for dust. Now it's for dirt out in the playground. And so the first one I had to have that degree of examination on, there was dust in one of the rooms, lead in the dust. And that meant that room had to be sealed off and cleaned, and it cost us 3 weeks, but we were able to, keep the parties together and calm, and we just waited till it was finished, and we proceeded. Most environmental problems can be fixed. It's a matter of, does the lender want that on their portfolio after having, the indemnifications of all the parties that are concerned, the SBA's consent to move ahead with it. If there's still reticence about taking that chance of putting that loan in their portfolio, then that may be perhaps something that should be addressed in their credit policy, and just not waste time on those kinds of transactions up front.
Yeah, well, and also, like, does the seller want to play ball and do it?
Well, and there again, we'll go to another subject, is working with your buyer and seller. If you, the BDO, really read the contract and understand, is there a probability of a problem, or is there potential for an environmental problem? Hopefully you've got working with a realtor who's experienced enough to know in these kind of situations, you would want to build into the contract that says, I'm going to have to do a phase 1 and make sure there's no prior contamination that's not been disclosed. But if we find something that's going to require a phase 2, the seller ought to be paying for it, because it becomes their problem and responsibility, since, yes, I could back out of the purchase right now, but you're going to want to sell it to someone else, and they're going to do a phase 1 and find out there's a phase 2, and you might as well address the issue here and just let's find out what it is, and you're going to have to remediate it if that's required. That is good real estate thinking, and it helps you be a better lender, because that path has already been paved.
Are you getting in there with buyers and sellers and really getting into the deal making aspect of this job, like in terms of like just being really active with the buyer and even sometimes with the seller? Or
Absolutely. No? Because I'm looking for success for all parties. And so I've worked more with the real estate brokers who refer me business and help them kind of understand some of the implications that are involved or potentially could be. And they want to close sales. And if they work hard, they identify a buyer, they get it under contract, negotiate the terms, come to me, and we qualify somebody, and we get down to the 11th hour, and there's some problem like, an environmental issue where we've stubbed our toe, they don't want to lose the sale either. So they've been very open-minded to input before they're pulling a contract out.
Yeah, and you're really convincing with your Southern accent too. So like people are gonna probably do what you say.
I didn't know it was Southern, but thanks.
Oh, what do you call it?
Atlanta, really. Atlanta sort of erases a lot of accents people get.
Oh, well, it's in the South, right? So. Okay, so going back to the training, sorry if I'm jumping around, but we went a little bit on a tangent, but do you think it's realistic that shops are going to put together good training programs that produce like they used to from remote, or does it need to be handled by a third party?
Well, to scale it, you would look to third parties. And, there are some outstanding banking schools. University of Wisconsin Banking School up there, run by the Wisconsin Bankers. The Stonier Graduate School of Banking, operated by the American Bankers Association. The ABA, the NAGGL, NAGGL, all offer training. And it's, if management commits to sort of tracking these and sending people out to them, I think it makes a big difference in strengthening the bench. And it could be, certainly the frustration that you're thinking about here with backroom underwriting people is not unique to your company. It's something everyone shares. I would just go to NAGGL and just encourage them to start really focusing more on those skill sets and recruiting people, not just for a little 2-day, refresher course or here's what the SOP changed to, and you need to put this in your underwriting grid, but truly, how do you start somebody who's never made a loan into underwriting loans?
Right.
And that's a tall order, no doubt, and it's going to be a commitment of capital on their part, and therefore, it's not going to be cheap for the participants to access it. But what if you could do that? Take somebody who's been in the business world for 5 or 10 years, maybe they have been a loan officer somewhere, and convert them, train them to be a real underwriter with a world-class training program.
Well, and we're at the NAGGL conference, and they have some sort of diploma program, right? I don't know that you can go through it and then you come out the other side an underwriter, but you're giving me some good ideas because, one, you said these banking schools. Could you go recruit from people who graduated from the banking school, first of all, just to find the person? Like, would that make sense?
You could, but keep in mind, like what I mentioned, the Stonier Graduate School, it's teaching you how to be a banker, not an underwriter. So the credit emphasis there only touches on, it's rather light, and it's folding that into the complete experience of being a banker, asset liability management and technology and compliance and several other parts of the industry.
So maybe their sites are a little bigger, like they want to run a bank or something.
Right. Or they want to run a department in a bank, be the auditor or.
Well, I mean, you could work your way up: underwriter, credit manager, chief credit officer.
Absolutely. And in those roles, it's very helpful to understand how the bigger bank works. And even though we have a lot of non-banks in the process, they're still banks. They have to get money to lend money.
Right. So, yeah, well, I mean, I would ideally like to identify the right person that has, the it factor, like someone who I just think would be a good culture fit, understand small business, have that sense of urgency. Well, because, I mean, in our world, we're trying to produce these turn times. Everyone wants to close yesterday. And it's just SBA is not meant for that. It's not really built for that. But you still have to kind of at least know that there are deadlines. People, anyway, don't want to go off on the tangent. But then training them how to do a pro forma balance sheet is easy if you find the right person. Maybe it's not easy, but you know what I mean? You can train certain things much easier than training like just the desire to be, get better and be coached and grow.
You can build an Excel spreadsheet that does a pro forma balance sheet based on your sources and uses, because that's what I do. And I don't have to fool around with trying to balance a pro forma balance sheet.
Okay.
So
bad example.
Well, no, it's actually a good one, but it's getting someone to understand it. And the bad news is I'm probably one of, 60 BDOs in our company, and I would bet there's maybe
you just gave away
10 of
what
us.
Company you're in now.
Sorry, but that's not really a secret. But I would imagine, there's 10 of us that really do that much, go that far for our clients, and that's, less than 15%.
How do those 15% or those 10 BDOs produce relative to the other 50 BDOs?
I have no clue. But remember, half my company is in California, and that's a different world.
They don't send a report out?
Yeah, they do. But that's a different world to do SBA lending into, I can guarantee you.
All right. All right. So because I'm trying to come out of here with a playbook here because I want to do this. And honestly, I think I want to bring back the in-person office. Everyone's all remote is awesome. Screw the office. I want to bring it back. I want to build an office and I want to get the people from the university in the office and I want them all working in the office and I want to circle around the bullpen with like a baseball bat.
You would have been great in the 70s. Yeah.
Well, that's the theme of tonight's party for the NAGGL party, the 70s disco. All right. So we'll leave it with one more thing and then I'll let you leave. So if you can start over and you had no contacts and today you had to go to market as a 7A BDO, what would you be doing? And you could pay broker fees or you could not. It's up to you. You don't have to. You can change your mind. How would you go to market in the next, your first 90 days as a brand new BDO right now in today's market?
And you're wanting me to answer this not in the perspective of I've been in it so I would know how to start, but what are ideas that someone should use? I would start with trying to build spheres of influence to figure out who knows the business I'm looking for. It's one thing to go to a Chamber of Commerce networking event and meet 12 guys who sell insurance, and somebody has a massage studio and a yoga instructor and 3 people that have with a greeting card shop, and start talking about real estate loans or SBA loans in general. It's another to figure out, okay, who knows who is selling real estate, is a real estate agent. Who knows who's selling a business? Well, that'd be a business broker. And I would start looking for those people who are in the middle of many people I'm looking for. And I would start trying to make myself known, come back again. Successful real estate people have plenty of sources. They've been doing it for years. And it's not going to be easy to break into that. But everyone loves persistence. Everyone loves an underdog. Letting them know that you recognize how good they are and that you would just like to have, something. If someone stumbles on one of their referrals, you'd love to pick it up and run with it. And I would just, become known as that person that passes out a lot of coffee or donuts to get myself in the door and meet and make these kinds of contacts. I'd join the board of realtors. I'd be going to their lunches. I'd be going to their network meetings. I would really know my craft. As important as it is to become known yourself, I'd make sure I knew what I was talking about, and I would become best in class for understanding the SBA business. I would know the SOP. I'd know how to, the first thing is who's eligible, who's not. How much does my company lend on a particular product? What are our policies around different closing aspects? And, not let someone catch you in ignorance.
That was well put. So, and if I asked you that question 20 years ago, your answer would have been the same.
Go to the Chamber of Commerce meeting. Now, yeah, it would have been totally different. And a lot of that comes out of experience.
Well, it would have been different because of your experience. And so just for the record, don't go to the Chambers of Commerce meeting. But, it would have been the same. I'm saying if we were in the year 2000,
right,
you would still do those things. Your answer wasn't probably what I would do, which is start a podcast, put out YouTube content, create a website. That wasn't your answer. It was what you said.
Right. And again, I think your podcast gets you referrals from other bankers. So you are doing essentially kind of what I prescribed with just a 21st century twist to it. Right. You're attracting attention to yourself and being the go-to guy for people who you don't know. Brokers, perhaps loan officers, perhaps whatever, people who like that what you're talking about, and you're congregating others who know what they're talking about and becoming a resource. And so you become their resource.
Okay. Yeah. So in other words, I'm doing what you're doing, just in the metaverse.
Yes. I hope you didn't buy any real estate there.
I bought a yacht. All right, Charles. Well, thank you for being my first in-person guest on the podcast. It was good catching up.
Great seeing you again, Ray.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.